This is Terry Wager. This is my vlog for February 13th, 2015. The time is 7:38 p.m. My daughter, Shawna Wagar, who is living at this apartment, is not even trying to hide her guilt in this murder conspiracy that my wife and her side of the family joined into back in 1999. She's not hiding the fact that they're framing me. She's deliberately and intentionally walking through the fucking front door, or she walks out from her bedroom and comes out into the living room here, and she deliberately whispers accusations at me. She's doing this deliberately and intentionally. She wants me to know that she's guilty. It's her way of daring me. It's her way of admitting to her guilt, and at the same time, she could easily deny it if I actually record her doing this, because chances are, because she's whispering it so quietly, I can't really prove that she's doing it, but I can hear her doing it. It's loud enough for me to hear, but it's not loud enough to prove that it's her doing it. Assuming I had some means of recording her, which I don't. Like, the cell phone here can only record for like an hour, and of course it's crappy video and it has crappy audio recording capabilities. This is just an El Cheapo prepaid phone that I paid like $30 for at like Best Buy. It doesn't have really decent recording capability. So she's technically admitting to her guilt under her breath. Now, I already know I'm surrounded by a Portland Police Department sting operation and by the Multnomah County Sheriff's sting operation. They were working jointly in framing me for crimes. My wife was working at the Multnomah County Jail Kitchen back in 1999. She was recruited into an affair with somebody in law enforcement, and those people gave my wife permission to frame me as a pedophile while she was cheating on me and she was working at the county jail kitchen. They told my wife to quit her job to hide her connections with law enforcement. And on the very same day, the county sheriffs filled out paperwork to take over, and the Portland police filled out paperwork to take over the surrounding apartments surrounding mine. And from that point forward, my wife and everybody on her side of the family were on board with this sting operation, and they were being coached and directed by the county sheriffs as to how to make me look like a bad guy for their video surveillance. And my wife and her side of the family were being coached and paid and funded by the Multnomah County Sheriffs into turning my yard into a playground with multiple pools, large trampoline, and all kinds of other shit, swing set, you name it. I mean, they literally turned my yard into a playground while the county sheriffs arranged to get a double onto my property. Now, my wife recruited our oldest daughter, Shawna, into this, and my wife and the county sheriffs that had the department directly next door to us were pretty much on a daily basis directing my daughter back then as to what to do for their video surveillance. She was essentially their voluntary little porn star that would perform for their little video surveillance, which was illegal because they illegally broke into my home and they illegally bugged my home, and my wife and her daughters were performing for their video surveillance at the direction of the officers that were right next door. And my wife and her sister would meet regularly with these officers on an every other day basis practically. They would use the pretense that they're going shopping together every 2 to 3 days. That's how blatant it was, every 2 to 3 days. Before my wife and her family joined into this sting operation, my wife might have hung out with her sister like once a month, once every other month. They would, if anything, they would just talk on the phone to each other most of the time. They didn't spend that much time with each other until they joined into the sting operation. After that, my wife and her sister were going shopping every 2 to 3 days together. And each and every time they were meeting with law enforcement officers, and law enforcement officers were telling them, okay, here's what you do next. So they were being coached and directed by law enforcement as to how to frame me. And they recruited our oldest daughter into this. We had 3 daughters. They recruited our oldest daughter into this, and she was performing for these people voluntarily. And she was performing for their illegal video surveillance. I uncovered all this pretty much at its inception, and was hanging in there to document their communications and to document the process they were using in self-defense, because I learned right off the bat I was being set up, and that it was a sting operation, that people in law enforcement were involved, that everybody on my wife's side of the family were given permission to do this to me, and that they were being coached and directed by law enforcement as to how to do it, and that law enforcement was funding it, and that they're going to bring in a double. So I knew damn well whether I stay, whether I leave, I'm going to be framed. So I gave them the impression I didn't know, with the intent of hanging in there to prove it. I knew if I just up and left, they would have still framed me. I won't be able to prove a damn thing. But if I stay, I can prove it. Because I had enough information to know how to prove it. I knew anytime my wife was with her side of the family, any member of her side of the family, they're talking about this sting operation. And chances are they were meeting with law enforcement officers and being coached and directed as to what to do next. And there was a lot of that going on. I was literally catching the county sheriff officers directing Shawna, my oldest daughter, as to what to do for their video surveillance. Because they were right next door. They were literally right next door. We lived in a duplex at the time, and they were right next door. And they would just step outside of the apartment, and they would go to Shawna's room, and they would just tell her. They just told her what to do next, and then she would start performing for video surveillance immediately after that. Well, when they got the double onto my property, that's when law enforcement started staging theft on our property. They were stealing things that were on our property from our yard. I'm going to have to assume they were also staging break-ins. I don't know that for a fact at the time. Anyway, I'm going to assume they did, because I know after the fact, I found out after the fact they were framing me for break-ins. So I'm going to assume that these sting operatives were staging break-ins for the purpose of setting me up for that. I already knew they broke into my home to bug it, so I already knew they're guilty of break-ins in that regard anyway. And they staged a full-blown car explosion 30 feet from my apartment. When I kicked this double off my property, that's when the sting operation concentrated its efforts on my mother and on my father. And literally a week after I kicked this double off my property, the county sheriff used this double to batter my mother. And my mother lost her motorhome over this. She lived in a motorhome at a mobile home park. She lost her motorhome over it. I had to take my mother away from these Portland police officers and from this double. And I had to take my mother home with me because she had to abandon her motorhome to this double, because the Portland Police Department didn't give a shit that this look-alike dude that they were using as the double, they didn't give a shit that he battered my mother. And they insisted, even though it was my mother's motorhome, they insisted that double gets to stay and live in my mother's motorhome. So my mother had to abandon her motorhome just to get away from these people. And a month later, my wife poisoned my mother. My wife, Joan Wager, poisoned my mother. My mother called 911 on that, and the Portland Police and County Sheriffs did absolutely nothing on her complaint. Absolutely fucking nothing. They quite literally just covered it up. Literally. And I found out 3 weeks later that people in law enforcement poisoned my father. Now, my father and my mother were divorced. They lived separately. My father lived on the other side of town, and he is not connected with my mother in any way. And around the same time that my wife poisoned my mother, My father was poisoned, and my father told me it was people in law enforcement that did it to him. He described them as plainclothes people in law enforcement. In other words, sting operatives. He explained what they did to him. He told me they were harassing and terrorizing him. In essence, he was describing harassment tactics that sting operatives are using, that people in law enforcement use when they have you surrounded and they have apartments surrounding your home. And they had my father surrounded, and they were terrorizing him, and they poisoned him. And he didn't have a phone. My father didn't own a phone. My father never owned a phone in his life. And he never once asked me for my phone number because he hated phones and he never used phones. So he had no way to call me. He had no way to call me to warn me. So when he got well enough to where he could leave his apartment, and it took him about 3 weeks to reach that point, he tried to come over to my place to warn me, and my wife made sure I wasn't home that day, so I wouldn't get the message from my father. Well, I happened to notice my father was at the bus stop, so I pulled over and spoke to my father at the bus stop. So I found out what they did to my father. And my wife and our daughters were in the car, and I had our car parked like 30 feet away while I was talking to my father. And while I'm talking to my father, and my father's telling me what these officers did to him and how they poisoned him and how they were harassing and terrorizing him, my wife was 30 feet away inside the car telling our oldest daughter, Shawna, to get out of the vehicle and stand next to me for the video surveillance. I could hear my wife, Joan Wager, saying this to our daughter. And then our oldest daughter got out of the car and walked over to me. She didn't even say hi to her grandfather, nothing. She just obediently did what my wife Joan told her to do. Just stand next to me for the video surveillance, and that's what she was doing. She didn't say hi or nothing. She didn't give a rat's ass. Her grandfather is a victim of being poisoned. 3 days later, my father was dead. 3 days later, it was county sheriffs that came to my door to tell me my father died. And the fucking county sheriff officer that came to my door to tell me this made mention that he entered my father's apartment to remove his meds. He had the gall to make that fucking statement to my face. My father wasn't on any meds. He was poisoned by people in law enforcement. My father just warned me, and then they murdered him. And here's the fucking county sheriff. I already knew my wife's fuck buddies in law enforcement had the apartment next door. I already knew I'm a victim of a fucking sting operation. I already knew my wife and daughters were working for and performing for these motherfuckers in a goddamn bullshit sting operation. And I already knew they were using a double to set me up. So this fucking county sheriff officers, for all intents and purposes, is basically admitting they're the ones responsible for my father's death. Because, first off, my father was not on any damn meds. He was hinting they're responsible. And keep in mind, my father just warned me before they murdered him. And for the next 5 days after this, I was being threatened. I was receiving multiple phone calls from 2 different people in law enforcement that were pretending to be people that are not in law enforcement, and they were making threats and demands for 5 days straight. And these I was under the belief that these were the officers that actually murdered my father. And the reason why is because these officers were pretending, these two different officers were, one was pretending to be my father's apartment manager, and the other one was pretending to be my father's funeral home director. And the reason I know they're both lying about that is because of the simple fact that nobody had my unlisted phone number. Not even my father. So there's no fucking way in hell they could be who the fuck they said they are. The only people that had my number at that time was my wife and her side of the family and my mother and anybody that my wife would give the number to. In other words, her fuck buddies in law enforcement, since I was, after all, surrounded by my wife's fuck buddies in law enforcement sting operation. So I know damn well they weren't who the fuck they said they were. My father's apartment manager did not have my phone number. The funeral home director did not have my phone number. I never contacted the fucking funeral home director. I mean, they never even gave me time to contact a fucking funeral home of any sort. They just immediately started calling me up and making threats and demands. And one was threatening me, making a demand to immediately remove my father's belongings from his apartment. That was the one pretending to be the apartment manager. And the one that was pretending to be the funeral home director was making demands and threats, demanding that I pay for my father's cremation, of which I never fucking authorized, ever. Because I already fucking knew they murdered him. I'm not going to fucking pay for a fucking cremation. They poisoned him. I know damn well they poisoned him. And the fucking murderers are making threats and demands, demanding that I pay for his cremation, so that they can, and demanding that I go into my father's apartment to remove his belongings, so that they can fucking set me up for the fucking homicide. "5 days, these threats and demands were made by these people in law enforcement, and I was greatly in fear for my family's safety. I feared for my 3 daughters' safety. I even feared for my oldest daughter's safety, even though I knew she was helping them. I feared for everybody in my family's safety at this point. I literally believed at this point, if I say anything to anybody, it'll probably get somebody killed. Because that's what happened to my father. My father warned me about what they did to him, and they murdered him. And here are the murderers making threats and demands for 5 days straight. And I knew damn well that they were lying, because they're trying to act like it's perfectly normal for those people to have my phone number. Excuse me, it was an unlisted cell phone number. Excuse me, we didn't even have it for that very long. And oh gee, my own father never even had my fucking number. If he did, he wouldn't have had to make the trip to come see me. He would have just called me. An hour after the 5th day of getting these threatening, demanding phone calls, and I'm just refusing to do anything about these phone calls because I knew damn well these people were the murderers. An hour after I got the very last threatening phone call, my wife, Joan Wager, and her sister, Vicky Rosales, with big, fat, huge, honking fucking grins on their faces, were filling my home with paraphernalia. They just got done turning my yard into a playground. They just got done getting a double onto my property. They just got done staging thefts and staging full-blown car explosions on my property. And now, after they battered my mother using a double, and then they murdered my father right after they covered up my mother's 911 call. Gee, and after they blackmail me with threats and demands for 5 days straight, an hour after I get the last threatening fucking phone call, now my wife and her sister were filling my inside of my home with paraphernalia. They already turned my yard into a playground. Now they're being told by law enforcement that was right next door to put paraphernalia in my home. The paraphernalia they were putting in my home was porn and life-size Barbie dolls. And my wife and her sister were pretending, they're just grinning from ear to fucking ear, and they're pretending the life-size Barbie dolls are for our daughters. These are life-fucking-sized Barbie dolls. I mean, they're this freaking tall, man. They're taller than this fucking refrigerator right here. Yeah. That's how tall the... And they were putting porn in my closet. They didn't say anything about the porn. I just found it after the fact. After they put the Barbie doll, the full-size Barbie doll things in our home. So they were filling it, after turning my yard into a playground and putting a double on my property, now they're filling my home with paraphernalia, such as life-size Barbie dolls and porn. 2 days later, I caught my oldest daughter, Shawna, writing in a diary, and she had her diary laid out and open, and she was writing with a pen or a pencil. I don't remember if she was using a pencil or a pen. I don't remember. I think she was using a pen. And she had an index card right next to her diary, and that index card had printed paragraphs on it, and she was looking at the index card to her diary and then writing, and then looking at the index card, and then looking at the diary and then writing, and then looking at the index card, and then looking at the diary and then writing. It was very obvious that she was copying the contents of this index card into her diary as though it was her own words. And my teenage daughter was grinning from ear to ear while doing this. Now, when my daughter afterwards left the apartment, I had the opportunity to read that goddamn diary and discovered that my daughter was being coached and directed by these people in law enforcement to label me as a pedophile in her diary. Keep in mind, this is 7 days after the death of my father. Just 7 short days after the death of my father. My daughter made no mention of this double on my property. My daughter made no mention of her grandmother being battered by this double. My daughter made no mention of the fact that her mother poisoned her grandmother. And my daughter made no mention of the fact that her grandmother called 911. And my daughter made no mention whatsoever of her grandfather's very recent death. All she wrote in that fucking diary was fabricated events that law enforcement was telling her to write. And all she was doing was labeling me as a pedo in it. So she was being coached and directed by the county sheriffs to write that diary. And it's 7 days after my father was murdered. There was a hole in my daughter's window screen big enough for somebody to put their arm through. So it wasn't very difficult, and it was during this time frame when that hole in her window screen appeared. So I knew right around the time they murdered my father, that's when they directed Shawna, my oldest daughter, to write that diary. And they poked a hole through the window screen so that they could pass her index cards through the window. And she was copying these index cards into her diary as though they're her own words. And I knew damn well it's not her own words because she was using words she didn't even know how to spell. She was using words in her diary she didn't even know at the time what they meant. I knew damn well she was being coached and directed to write that diary. Well, it was so blatant and obvious. I find myself quite literally surrounded by my own family members that literally joined into a fucking murder conspiracy with a bunch of pedophiles in law enforcement, and they were treating it like it's fucking sport and like it's a fucking game to fucking frame and murder people. They didn't even give a shit that I knew that they were filling my home with paraphernalia. Shawna, my oldest daughter, didn't even give a shit if I knew somebody was directing what she wrote in her diary. She didn't give a shit if I knew it. This was 7 days. I mean, I just endured 5 days of threats and demands from the very murderers that murdered my father. And an hour after I get the very last threatening call, that's when my wife and her sister, with big-ass huge grins on their faces, were filling my home with paraphernalia. And during this time, my oldest daughter was being coached by the officers that were right next door, in the apartment next door to us. They were passing her index cards, directing what she wrote in her diary. Now, this is how directed this sting operation was. And my wife and her sister and her daughter are nothing but fucking whores to these officers and don't give a shit who they murder. That was back in 1999. A lot has happened since then. A hell of a lot. In 2005, I was battered by the Portland Police County Sheriffs. And at that time, my wife is the one that got me into that situation, that got me battered. And for the next 2 weeks after I was battered, my wife, her sister, and my wife's mother, and my wife's oldest daughter were meeting almost daily with law enforcement officers, one of whom happens to be Officer Eric Carlson. And he's a Portland police officer. And they were trying to hide this fact from me, but they're not hiding it from their coworkers at Walmart. Everybody that worked at Walmart knew they were doing this. I had a broken rib, a fucked up knee at the time. I was debilitated. They had me in a debilitated condition. I didn't know it yet at the time, but they murdered my mother. And I didn't know at the time because I was never informed. Nobody informed me. I had no idea it even happened. And it was my first day back in Portland. I mean, I just got to Portland. And they got me into a situation where I ended up getting battered. And ended up with a broken rib and a fucked up knee. Nobody ever called an ambulance for me. Nobody took me to the hospital. My wife and her side of the family, the female members of the family anyway, were poisoning off other people on their side of the family as well. They poisoned my wife's father, Virgil Minor. He was debilitated at the time when I was battered. He was debilitated in the hospital. He never came out alive. He was in the hospital from January, February, March, April, and then died. Well, by April of 2005, April 2005, I'm starting to get well enough to where I can get a little active. My rib wasn't fully healed. My knee never really fully healed. But I was able to get around somewhat and wasn't quite so debilitated anymore. I was still debilitated, but I could manage to do some things. Well, it was during this time that my wife was recruiting our two youngest daughters into this sting operation conspiracy of theirs, and my wife was making it known to our daughters that she's having an affair with a cop that's acting as a double. And she was using hints as a way of recruiting her daughters. They were making certain things known with our two youngest daughters, because they were, through the months of March and April 2005, my wife was heavily recruiting our daughters into this. And in April 2005, they successfully recruited our two youngest daughters into this sting operation. And they weren't really trying to hide it from me. They didn't really care if I knew. They wanted me to know because they were hinting at it the whole time. And they never realized that I basically uncovered everything in its inception, back in 1999, back when my wife was still working at the county jail kitchen. So they were always under the belief that I didn't know what the fuck's going on. So when they recruited my wife, when my wife recruited our two youngest daughters, I knew immediately. They weren't flat out admitting to it, but they were strongly hinting at it, and they were repeatedly hinting at it. And they thought a lot of their hints was going over my head, when in fact I'm fully, completely, totally understanding each and every hint that they give. Even when they hint at each other and they think I'm not paying attention, I'm still picking up on the hints. I found out in April 2005 that my wife, Shawna Wagar, was hooking our daughters up with a Portland officer named Eric Carlson at Eastport Walmart. My wife, Shawna Wagar, worked at Eastport Walmart at the time, and that's where she was bringing her daughters to meet up with Officer Eric Carlson. And after my wife first introduced our two youngest daughters to Officer Eric Carlson and to his buddies and his partners, that's when they recruited our two youngest daughters into it. So when they got ready for their next meeting with Officer Eric Carlson, I decided I'm going to say absolutely nothing. And when they get ready to leave for their next meeting with this officer, I decided I'm going to tag along and act like I don't know what the fuck's going on. Because I had every intention of confronting them at Eastport Walmart, because I already knew they were using a double, and I already knew he was a Portland cop. Or I didn't know he was a Portland cop. I thought he was either a Portland cop or a county sheriff. I knew he was one or the other. I find out after the fact he's a Portland cop, but that's a long story. That's another story. I knew he was one or the other. And when we get to Eastport Walmart, my wife and one of our daughters, her name was Megan Wagar, they tried to separate from me as soon as we got through the door at Eastport Walmart, trying to distance themselves from me. And my wife was heading right where she knew Officer Eric Carlson would be. And Officer Eric Carlson is not working in that store. He's not in a Walmart uniform. He's just in plain clothing. As a matter of fact, he was dressed very similar to how I dress. And my wife was walking as fast as she could possibly walk, trying to gain distance from me. She got about 25 feet ahead of me. And Officer Eric Carlson, he was standing with a group of actual Walmart employees that were near the cashiers, that were in a Walmart meeting that a manager was having with these employees. There was about 12. There was easily a dozen Walmart employees, along with a Walmart manager, that was in this meeting. Officer Eric Carlson, who was in plain clothing and not in a police uniform or in a Walmart uniform at all. He's not in either. He's just in plain clothing. He's in this group palling with these people. And as my wife was approaching near this group, Officer Eric Carlson detached himself from this group of people. He took about 3 steps away, in other words. That's how close my wife got to this group of employees. And he got right alongside my wife and started immediately talking about their affair. And they were about 25 feet ahead of me, and he was talking louder than fucking shit, man. I mean, he wasn't trying to talk quietly at all. I'm like 25 feet behind my wife. At this very moment, my daughter was walking right alongside me at that moment. And I heard it very clearly, so I know damn well that our daughter heard it. My daughter broke out laughing Officer Eric Carlson immediately talked about their affair. And my wife hushed Officer Eric Carlson by saying, "He's behind me, he's behind me, he's behind me," 3 times in rapid succession. And Officer Eric Carlson turned to look at me, and the son of a bitch was smirking. And then him and my wife walked down some aisle together, away from this group and away from me. And when my wife said, "He's behind me, he's behind me, he's behind me," and Officer Eric Carlson turned to look at me, this incident that happened caused my daughter, that was walking right alongside me, it caused her to break out laughing. So it was very blatantly obvious that they're busted. And it was very obvious. They're caught in their affair. And I'm immediately noticing at this point, when Officer Eric Carlson is turning to look at me, I'm recognizing at this moment that this is the double that they're using now to set me up. Before they used a different person as a double. Now they're using my wife's lover as a double. The reason why I knew this is because when I was battered in January of 2005, I overheard the officers that battered me talking about using a double. And I was being gang stalked by Officer Eric Carlson a week later. And he was a brunette at the time. And I noticed he was a damn close look-alike. And I noticed he was with the county sheriff officer that was responsible for me being battered a week after I was battered. So I was under the belief he's the double that they were using. Well, when I see this incident happening in April 2005, when I'm catching my wife and her lover together at Eastport Walmart, I noticed right away that Officer Eric Carlson dyed his hair and he cut his hair short. He dyed his hair blonde. And after he had to act between January and April of 2005. At some point, he dyed his hair blonde. He must have been acting. They must have been using him as a double. And then after the fact, he just cut off all the blonde hair. And basically, he had what he had was extremely short hair that looked reddish. Not because he's a redhead, but because he's a brunette, but because he dyed his hair blonde, and the roots of his hair looked reddish. So at this particular time, he looked like a blondish, like a reddish blonde hair, like a strawberry blonde kind of a person. I'm a sandy blonde, but he looked at that moment kind of like a strawberry blonde. I already knew they were using him as a double, and I knew he dyed his hair because of the fact that I already knew he was a brunette. So I'm thinking to myself, so this is the fucking double they're using now to set my ass up. And I'm thinking this to myself. And, I'm noticing at this point, as this thought is registering, this is when I realized that group of Walmart employees, of around a dozen employees, and that manager that was in this group that was having this meeting, they all turned to look at me. And that's when it registers immediately with me that this full group of people just heard Officer Eric Carlson discussing his affair with my wife, and just heard my wife saying to Officer Eric Carlson, "He's behind me, he's behind me, he's behind me," and then the two of them book it down some aisle together. Because this group all turned to look at me. And this is the moment when I realized that that this was open knowledge at East Fort Walmart, that everybody there knew, and that they're not even hiding it from anybody in the store. And I slowed down. I didn't really, this moment just kind of took the wind out of my sail at this point, because that's when I realized, gee, what good is a confrontation going to do? I've just discovered the fact that not only is it a murder conspiracy, I already knew it was a murder conspiracy, but not only am I establishing that this is a murder conspiracy, but I'm discovering the fact that it's open knowledge there at East Fort Walmart. And my daughter that was walking alongside me, she just continued along to catch up to my wife, Joan Wager, and to Officer Eric Carlson. They didn't give a shit if I noticed. And, I'm just in shock at this moment, and I'm like, I just went down a separate aisle, and I got like halfway down an aisle and just stopped, and I just started thinking about what I just witnessed. And as I'm registering everything that I just witnessed, as I'm processing all this information, that meeting, that Walmart employee manager meeting that was taking place, ended because of this incident. But they didn't disperse to go. They didn't disperse to go to work. They stayed there in a group, and they were all laughing and talking about what just happened. And they're all looking over at me, and then they're all still talking. And then they kept looking over at me, and none of them were acting like they're on my side or have sympathy for me or anything. They're acting like, they were talking, but, about what just happened. And they're asking each other, does Terry know? Does he know? Did he find out? This is the kind of shit that they were saying. They were waiting to see. They're trying to figure out if I found out. And I mean, they were literally saying shit like, "Does he know? Did he find out?" People were looking over at me saying, "Does he?" They're looking at me, and then they look over at the employee they're standing next to, and they're like, "Does he know? Did he find out?" And then they keep looking at me again, and they're like, employees that were not even in this group, but were walked into the store after the fact and walked up to this group, is overhearing what this group is talking about. And then they're looking over at me, and then they're looking at the group, and they're saying shit like, "Does he know? Did he find out? Is there going to be a fight?" This is the shit they were talking about. So I'm discovering at this point that it's fully open knowledge at East Fort Walmart that my wife's having an affair with a cop, and that he's acting as a goddamn double, and that my wife recruited our daughters into this shit, and was literally hooking our daughters up with this officer that's acting as a double. I was in such shock over this. Now keep in mind, I'm a father. I had 3 children. I didn't want to be turned against my daughters. I didn't want to blame my daughters for what Portland Police and what my wife and her side of the family joined into. I didn't want to hate them. I didn't want to be angry at them. I didn't want to accuse them of fucking homicide and fucking murder and murderous sting operations. I didn't want to think of them that way. I wanted to protect them from this goddamn murder conspiracy. I was in shock at this point. Because I feared for my daughter's safety. I took 4 days to think about it before I decided to take any action on this. And it's around this time when Virgil Minor, my wife's father, who sat in a hospital for at least 4 months, died. I tried to warn people about this. I took 4 days to think about it, and I decided I'm going to have to try to warn people. But I figured I knew it was dangerous too, because I knew there's just too damn many people. There's just way too damn many people that were involved. And my first attempt to warn people got no help whatsoever. None. Zero. Nada. But what it did get is it got my wife warned that I'm warning people. And what my wife did literally an hour later was she poisoned me. She made me a cup of coffee. She put antifreeze in it. And she poisoned me. I was severely debilitated from it. I was so badly debilitated from it, I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk. I couldn't even think because the pain is so disorienting. It's a disorienting pain where you suffer everywhere. And my throat swelled up. I couldn't talk. I couldn't form a sentence. If I tried to talk, my speech sounded slurred because of the fact that my throat was swollen. I couldn't walk straight, and I couldn't balance. I couldn't even form a sentence if I no matter how hard I wanted to, I couldn't form a sentence. I was severely debilitated, and I was surrounded by the very people that are responsible for me being poisoned, and that everybody in my family pretended, meaning my wife and daughters, they pretended nothing's wrong. They just acted like nothing's wrong, and they just continued to pal around and sleep around with their fuck buddies in law enforcement, and they just continued to use Officer Eric Carlson as a double to stage and commit crimes while they have me in a debilitated condition. At this time, my wife worked at Eastport Walmart. Well, my wife's oldest daughter, Shawna, worked at Clackamas Walmart, which is like a mile away from Eastport Walmart. And my wife's sister, Vicki Rosales, also worked at Clackamas Walmart. Well, my wife turned everybody at Eastport Walmart against me, and my daughter, Shawna, and my wife's sister, Vicki Rosales, turned everybody at Clackamas Walmart against me behind my back. So basically, my wife and my wife's daughters and my wife's sister spent a couple years recruiting people at Walmart in both those stores to lie for them, to cover for them, to back up their lies, to hide the fact that they're using a double from me. They tried to. They still thought after they poisoned me, they didn't realize yet that I already knew they're using a double. They didn't realize that yet. They thought I didn't know. So they were still trying to hide that from me, even though I already knew. And everybody at Eastport Walmart and everybody at Clackamas Walmart were trying to conceal the fact from me that my wife and my wife's sister and my wife's daughters were palling around and sleeping around with these cops and that they were using a double. Everybody in both of these stores were trying to hide this fact from me. It was open knowledge in both of these stores. They weren't trying to hide it from their coworkers. The Portland Police and the County Sheriff would simply vilify me and give me blame for shit behind my back And they used this as a way of vilifying me in the minds and in the eyes of these Walmart employees. And then they would make up justification and make up excuses for setting me up to get rid of me. In other words, in the eyes of the Walmart employees, they were trying to make me, my wife and her fuck buddies in law enforcement were trying to make me look like a bad guy. And they were using that as their justification as to murdering me off and getting rid of me. And by vilifying me behind my back, that's how they ended up getting so many people to lie for them. They literally had, by 2007, they literally had everybody at Eastport Walmart and everybody at Clackamas Walmart literally willing to lie for their asses. In 2007, I'm in an extremely debilitated condition. I have been repeatedly denied emergency services. I'm pretty much in a bedridden state. I'm bleeding internally from having organs exploded on me because they poisoned me. And they were setting me up for a homicide while I'm in this debilitated condition. And on March 26, 2007, my wife, Joan Wager, and our youngest daughter, Kaylee Wager, and my wife's lovers in law enforcement, Officer Eric Carlson and Officer John Ray, along with a couple of female officers, one named Erica and another one named Adrian, they all committed a homicide. They were committing break-ins, rapes, and homicides. And they did this using Officer Eric Carlson as a double. They were taking photogenic photos and video surveillance footage of Officer Eric Carlson staging and committing these type of crimes that day. And they were trying to set me up for a homicide. And I literally caught them in the act, planting evidence in my home, and caught them poisoning my coffee pot, and caught them bragging at Clackamas Walmart to Clackamas Walmart employees that they were setting me up as a pedo, and that they used Officer Eric Carlson as a double, and they were laughing and bragging about how they got Officer Eric Carlson on photogenic photos in our daughter's room, and how he was posing for photogenic photos, and how they got pictures of his dick and all this shit, and they were laughing and bragging about it, and they wanted to cover their asses because there were certain sections of their video surveillance they wanted erased. The part where they committed the homicide they wanted erased, not to mention it's around the same time frame they poisoned my coffee pot, and they sneaked around my apartment, and they were planting evidence in my apartment. And this is the video time frame that they wanted erased. And they were making mention of this to their superiors at Clackamas Walmart. Their superior, not people that work at Walmart. I'm talking about these were people in law enforcement that committed these crimes, and they met up with their superiors in the front lobby of Clackamas Walmart. That's where they met up, and their superiors in law enforcement arrived there to pick up the photogenic photos that their sting operatives took of the double they were using. In other words, Officer Eric Carlson. And they were admitting that Officer John Ray is caught on their video surveillance, and they're naming off the portion of the video surveillance that they wanted erased. Well, this is the video portion where these officers committed a fucking homicide, and they were planting evidence in my home, and they poisoned my coffee pot before they left my home. So that's the time frame that they're requesting of their superiors to have erased. And their superiors arrived not to pick up video surveillance, but to pick up the photogenic photos that the sting operatives took of Officer Eric Carlson pretending to be me. Well, they went in the back of Clackamas Walmart after this, and they were printing flyers using Walmart supplies and Walmart printers, Walmart office printers that is near the break room in the back of the store. And they were printing flyers, giving me the blame for the crimes they committed. My wife, Joan Wager, printed half those flyers. The female officer named Adrian printed the other half. Now, this is a group. This is a that was a sting operation. Several people involved. My wife, Joan, her youngest daughter, Kaylee, Officer Eric Carlson, Officer John Ray, a female officer with the first name Erica, some black bitch by the name of Adrian. There was one more that I cannot identify by name, but she was an older lady, and I assumed to be a superior officer to the rest of these officers that were at my apartment that morning, inside and outside. They broke in when I was asleep on the living room couch. They crawled in through my wife's bedroom window. My wife let them in, and my wife was letting them out through the bedroom window. Their break-in woke me up, and thinking I was catching my wife in her affair with an armed cop and catching them inside my home, I put an audio recorder in my wife's purse so I could prove their affair and prove they're inside my home that morning. So when my wife and her fuck buddies in law enforcement sneaked out of the apartment and left, my wife took her purse with her. And when they got to Clackamas Walmart, they were bragging about everything that they did. They admitted I was asleep at the time. They admitted they were framing me as a pedophile. They admitted that they were using Officer Eric Carlson as a double. They admitted Eric Carlson was posing for photogenic photos on our daughter's bed. They admitted that they got it on photogenic. They admitted they took pictures of his dick. They admitted that Officer John Ray is on their video surveillance and that they need to have a certain portion of their video surveillance erased because of it. They're using Officer John Ray as their excuse to erase the portion where the homicide occurred and where they were planting evidence in my home and where they poisoned my coffee pot, because they also admitted to that too. They admitted they poisoned my coffee pot. For the next 3 hours, they bragged to people at Clackamas Walmart. They were recruiting Walmart employees to lie for them. And they were using Walmart office supplies and Walmart office printers to print flyers giving me the blame for their crimes. When they got done printing the flyers, my wife, Joan Wager, and Officer Eric Carlson found out that they got everybody in the soft lines department, that's the clothing department and shoes department at Clackamas Walmart, which is practically half the store, to lie for them. And after this, my wife and Officer Eric Carlson were having celebration sex in the back of that fucking store near the lockers where my wife kept her purse. My audio recorder is still running in her purse. And during my wife and Officer Eric Carlson's celebration sex, they discussed the female child they murdered during their celebration sex. During. At least 2 people walked in on my wife and Officer Eric Carlson in the back of that store while they're having celebration sex. So there are witnesses to the fact that my wife and Officer Eric Carlson were having celebration sex after they printed those flyers. How do I know? Because I got it on my audio recorder. I retrieved my audio recorder after the fact. I literally caught them committing all the crimes and then bragging to all their crimes and bragging they were setting me up to get the blame, and then literally catching them spending 3 hours recruiting people there at Walmart to lie for them and printing flyers, giving me the blame, and bragging about pretty much everything they fucking did. The only thing they didn't admit to the Walmart employees, that according to the audio recording anyway,